Hi, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us for this Rethink Act. I'm extremely excited to introduce the book that we're talking about today, which is Tangled in Terror by Suhaiymah Manzoor-Khan. It's absolutely incredible. I learned so much, and I really hope that you enjoy this video.
Yeah, there are several that come to mind. I love that question because actually the Quran does really motivate and inspire me in the work that I do, because it is because I'm Muslim that I do believe that justice is something we have to fight for. And one of the ayahs, the lines that comes to mind really obviously for me, is one in which God says to us, "O believers, stand firmly for justice as witnesses to Allah, to God," and tells us to be just even if it's against ourselves, our parents, our kin, rich or poor, and basically to not have any discrepancy in our application of truth or in our application of justice. That motivated me even writing this book, because sometimes it's difficult to call certain things out, and sometimes it's difficult to wade into the contradictions and the nuances. But I felt like, with that being my guiding principle, that we have to speak truth and we have to kind of reveal injustices, no matter who is, I suppose, critiqued in that process. And the second line and ayah that comes to mind is in the second to last surah of the Quran, chapter of the Quran. It begins with, it's almost, it's an invocation, it's a dua, it's a prayer, and it's that, I seek refuge in the Lord of the daybreak. And I actually end my book and the conclusion with this line, because I think there's something so reassuring about the fact that there is a Lord of the daybreak, that there is a creator and an authority that actually owns and kind of holds the daybreak. And I think in times of so much darkness and difficulty, it's really difficult to see the light sometimes. And so the reason I wanted to end on that particular line was that, the daybreak will come, the day will eventually break, and it's our effort, but it's also calling on God, that I believe those two things kind of in tandem are what allow the day to break. And that keeps me, I suppose, optimistic at times when we can easily lose a lot of hope. Our current narrative about Islamophobia, well, what is it? It's a narrative that basically says Islamophobia is a prejudice against Muslims that is, morally not nice. And maybe we talk about it in terms of like verbal harassment or slurs, and occasionally a physical attack. And those things are, traumatic when they do occur, but that's a really reductive narrative, because at the same time, we live in a context where the phantom, the spectre of a Muslim threat, a terrorist threat, a barbarian threat, a patriarchal threat, is ever looming and used to justify security measures which actually prop up these really violent regimes, whether that's at the border against the threat of Muslims crossing into our countries, whether that's the threat of Muslims, potentially being violent in the future. So we need to look out for signs of radicalization amongst school children, amongst hospital patients, or whether it's a more general threat that follows us, when you board a train, you're told to see it, say it, sort it, and any other number of places. And so when we live with this contradiction where Islamophobia is understood in a really reductive way, but at the same time, global security industries, arms trades, and kind of, many multiple £1 million technologies are sold and making profit in the name of securing all of us from a Muslim threat, there's something amiss, there's something more going on. And what I think is really important, and why I think it's really important that we kind of expand our definition and our understanding of Islamophobia, is that actually the majority of us are not safe. The majority of us are not made safer by security and securitizing of the world. Instead, we're made more vulnerable, we experience more harm, and especially the most marginalized and vulnerable people in the world. So if we want to change our current circumstances, we have to get beyond these reductive understandings, we have to think about the language that we use, and we have to make connections so that we're not treating Islamophobia as this discrete and moral deficiency, but instead as one manifestation of global imperialist white supremacy that, operates in ways that benefit capitalists, shareholders, and profit makers. So when I was writing this book, I actually had the chance to interview and speak to a lot of inspiring people. And the reason that many of them inspired me is because of what they have endured and the lack of justice that they have found. So these are people who have been held in Guantanamo Bay on no charges, people who have been detained without trial, people who have had their homes raided, whose children have PTSD, again, on no basis, people who have experienced all sorts of state violence. And that inspires me because I've seen these people tell the truth of what happened to them and persevere and continue without any accountability for what happened, without any recourse to justice. If they can persevere, then I also can persevere. And if they can call for justice, then I too should be calling for justice. That's my responsibility. And what people can do in terms of actions, and I suppose actions that I think of when I think of those people, is number one, changing the language that we use. One of the things I'm really keen on in this book is kind of reminding people that we shouldn't differentiate when we talk about violence, or we should be careful when we differentiate. You know, why is it the case that we call Muslims who perpetrate acts of violence terrorists, but when the state brutalizes people, murders people, separates families, allows people to drown, kicks them back into the ocean, we simply call that security? And then obviously there are more direct actions that we can take, and there are direct kind of pieces of legislation we need to see repealed entirely, whether that's the prevent policy, whether that's nationality and borders bills, bills to do with citizenship revocation. And those things are really important too. And there are people already, trying and organizing around that. And so the more people that can get involved with that, the better. But thirdly, in doing that, one of the actions we should always be careful of is that we remain intersectional, that we don't allow our kind of resistance to just end at, okay, repeal of prevent, for example. If we oppose those things, then let's make connections and say, actually, let's take action against any preemptive policing. Let's take action against all surveillance that is on a racialized basis. Let's take action against all surveillance. And when we do that, I think we end up at really exciting actions, which actually aren't just about kind of stopping violence that is currently happening, but are about creating a new world altogether, imagining new possibilities. What could a justice system look like that is truly safe for the majority of us, that is truly safe for all of us who are currently marginalized and harmed by it? What could an alternative look like in general when we think about living safely?